people by speaking in our languages and invoking that spirit. I do offer my thanks. But it's also a very important protocol, which Heather, in her own way, sometimes the indigenous protocols don't look stereotypically indigenous. And I think that's beautiful and wonderful. So Heather invoked the principle of acknowledging elders and mentors in the room. So I too will do that and acknowledge my mentor, Ray Barnhart. So we're in part of a chain with the next generation of scholars. Ray was on my supervisory committee for my PhD. So not only that, as Ray knows, he was reminding me when we had lunch yesterday, if not for Ray Barnhart, I would not be in this position. Ray talked me into doing this, so I have him to blame for everything as well as to thank sometimes. Ray talked me into coming to UBC to do my PhD when we met at our tribal college library. And I was very happy working with my high school students. God, I love high school kids. And they loved me, and we had a great time. But I made a comment at a gathering of elders and parents that someone should go off, get a PhD, and come back home and start a teacher education program. If we had the same degree as those guys, and in a way I suppose this follows Graham, but I don't want to make too much of this. Graham's talk this morning, of course, has a section in it where, yes, a PhD does mean something. It means that people are going to take you seriously. They're going to listen to you. Well, I don't know that I mean, there's a lot of things that Graham and I might disagree about, and that might be one of them. And I can tell you stories about getting a PhD and then having people distinctly not listen to me. I mean, there are indigenous verbs that mean to not do something. Doesn't mean an inaction, it means an action. So there were people who took very forceful means to not listen to me. But I did go off to do the PhD, and Ray was central in that work. And one of the people who was there at UBC with me, and a dearly beloved colleague and fellow student in the PhD program, was my departed brother, Oscar Quigley. So Oscar and I became good friends, and in the future we had conversations and we worked together with Ray's projects and grant projects and attempts to change the world that Ray is always doing through grants like the National Science Foundation that we worked to achieve, and on indigenous knowledge systems in an international context. And Oscar and I would meet up at conferences, and we would reminisce about our days of struggle as PhD students at UBC. As well, we were influenced, both Oscar and I, by the work of Verna Kirkness, who I saw this last fall, and Heather has acknowledged in her own work and is utilizing. So to have an advisory committee that included Ray Barnhart and Verna Kirkness, and to have colleagues and fellow students to hang with, such as Oscar Quigley, I was very blessed, and I still acknowledge those blessings. So those protocols are important. Another protocol that we do oftentimes in the beginning is not only do we acknowledge those who have influenced us and helped us, but oftentimes we do some music. Sometimes at home people will drum and sing. I've brought my mouth bow, which comes from my mother's people, so I'll play you just a little bit. Because we believe that the spirits of joy, and when people say that they beat the drum, the elders say that's the sound of your mother's heart when you were in the womb, and you hear it, and it makes you happy about life and life's possibilities. So I play this in that same spirit. It's a very, very old instrument, not this one in particular, but the idea of this instrument. And so I got to hang out with Buffy St. Marie one time for a few days, and And we talked about this instrument and exchanged ideas. Buffy plays it as well, but we didn't play together. I'm a photographer as well, so these are my photographs of our place, of the Lummi Reservation, and the surrounding territory. We call the territory Sol Tamach, which means the land of the people. This is in the Halpamelum of the Stalo people. And these are carvings, art, scenes, the landscape, so that you can get the feel of place, because I want to talk in what little time I have left. You see, this is the thing, we have these meetings, band council meetings. I tell Heather about these things, so everybody has to go through the protocols, each person. You know how these things are. You're laughing because we sit around in a circle, and everybody introduces themselves, and they say who their grandparents are, and they say who their aunties are, and they tell you about, and then by the time everybody has gone around with the introductions and all the protocols, oh, we're out of time. Well, better luck next week. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because the respect for the protocol and the respect for the personhood and for the connections that we all bring from our communities, and the joy in listening to each other and celebrating that common thing, that is important. Now, this is difficult to have these conversations and assert these things in an academic environment. My colleagues at UBC think, oh, Michael, he's the mystical native, he's always doing all these, talking about spirituality, and he's kind of out there. I mean, Heather was talking about radical. She signed on for a pretty radical journey here when she got me on her committee. So I'm just going to read a little bit and be a little academic here for a bit to talk about these things, and then I don't want to take too much more time, and then maybe we'll open it up, and I guess we're going to have some questions, and you will help us with the questions, I presume. So that's really good. There's so much to say. I have traveled so many places, to New Zealand twice, to the Wananga. I've learned so many things from elders there, to the Arctic, to Nunavut, to Alaska a number of times, both Southeast and Fairbanks. And much time in Southeast. I was a high school teacher. I got fired from 3 different teaching jobs, really. I could never keep a job because I would get hired to help our Aboriginal kids, our Native kids, so I would advocate for them. And just as I tell my graduate students, when you do your research, don't just give us a report. I want to know, these all seem like great ideas. Everything seems like a great idea. What a great report from the community. They're doing a language program. They're doing, we've got a little bit of growth here. We've got a little bit of progress here. Everything looks like it's going good. Why didn't we do this before? Who would disagree with this? Who doesn't want this? Who stopped it before? I don't understand your report unless you tell me what the challenge is. And really, name names. Tell us what the obstacles are in front of us. And tell us in great detail how they work. And I think sometimes our leaders are afraid to do this. They're afraid to upset people. We were brought up to be very polite people. We were brought up not to, not to say, hey, you took our land, and so now you want to give us a little something back because you feel guilty? We're told not to say that. You don't say that to Julitos. That's white people in Halcomelum. You don't say that to Julitos because they'll get mad at you. So we tend to be pretty polite. Julito means the hungry ones. They came and they were starving, so native people kept them alive. So I'm just going to read a little section here. I don't have much time left. From a piece of writing in this paper, which is about how leaders and the concept of leadership gets theorized in ways that don't necessarily make sense to our elders and don't necessarily make sense to our own. In November, the title of this little the subtitle of this little section from the paper is called "Everything is Alive. Death is alive too." In November of 2008, I was invited to a Niska community in northern British Columbia for a traditional feast. November is early winter in the Nass Valley, and the foggy gray days were filled with light, cold rain that sometimes let the mountains show how soon the snow would arrive. The feast was to be held in union with a stone-moving ceremony for one of my graduate students, Peter, who had died of cancer the year before. It was explained to me that during the year following a death, the family mourns and then prepares a gravestone for the cemetery. The gravestone is then a year later in ceremony moved on a sled pulled by men from the village, from the house of the family to the cemetery. As one elder told me, the family spends the year with their heads down, but after the stone is put in place, they are able to lift their heads up and resume life's journey. Peter was from a very prominent Niska family, and they hosted a feast, potlatch, where thousands of dollars of accumulated commodities were given away as gifts to those attending from the village and from faraway communities. I attended both the stone-moving ceremony and the feast that night. The next day I met with the elders at the Nass Valley Post-Secondary Institute, WWN, Niska. One of my PhD students is Niska and doing a study of leadership, language, and traditional ecological knowledge. She had arranged the meeting with the four elders. This is Deanna that I'm talking about. Ray knows the student. She had arranged the meeting with the four elders as a focus group session to talk about leadership from a Niska perspective. A tea was provided, including boiled potatoes, salmon, and ulikan. The ulikan is a culturally important food for the Niska. The elders commented on its value in the old days since the fish arrived late in the winter and often kept villages from starvation. So they were actually, what we would think of as early spring. And people, the food's gone. And here's the blessing from the Creator, the ulikan. After we ate our meal, the PhD student began the discussion by asking what leadership meant in a Niska framework. I kept notes of what each person said during the afternoon and that we talked and listened. It seemed that the elders, 3 women and 1 man, were uneasy with the broad, abstract nature of the question of leadership. This whole stuff is coming from the university. It's a PhD student trying to theorize leadership in ways that will make sense to a university supervisory committee and the Faculty of Graduate Studies and a Faculty of Educational Theory and Educational Studies. But they were trying to help this poor PhD student who was a well-known community member, very respected, with the research task. The student was trying to elicit categories of an indigenous theory of educational leadership from the elders. But the conversation became more and more focused on what was on everyone's mind in the room. 4 young men had committed suicide in the valley that week, and the elders wanted to talk about that. That local conversation about the sadness and shock of the suicides became more of a way for me to understand Indigenous leadership approaches than any effort to form general theories or general principles in any academic sense. Aboriginal youth suicide is 5 to 6 times higher than for the non-Indigenous youth population in Canada, and conversations about this subject in First Nations communities are personal and painful. This was a moment of intense, stark reality that shaped the original discussion of leadership. From that point on, talk about leadership focused on the recent community events as metaphors and representations of historic and cultural themes that were the urgent and local leadership challenges, place-based. Leaders, the elders agreed, must maintain their spiritual vision and use the oral traditions of the people to inspire themselves and the community. One elder talked about how the stories were always told to help young people see the reality of their life and the consequences for bad choices. Don't play around with nature, they said. If you do something wrong or force yourself to do bad things, the Creator will take things away. Young people have forgotten this. All the elders talked about respect as the most powerful principle of leadership and vision. They made a connection between the importance of the stone-moving ceremony, the feast, and how the community must continue to show respect for death. There was also a connection to how youth must learn to respect the traditions of their culture and all that is alive within the ecology that surrounds them. One of the elders said, if we don't take care of death, death will come back to haunt you. Death is alive too. Death is alive too. The young people have forgotten this. The discussion continued to emphasize the central role of the spiritual and how the leaders of old could calm stormy seas as well as inspire the youth to respect both life and death. Without this respect for the traditional ways, the residual legacies of colonialism, including residential schooling and poverty, would produce more suicides. There's a lot more in this paper to say, and I don't have enough time. So I think a major point that I want to emphasize in all of my work with all of the elders from the Coast Salish territory to Alaska, throughout North America, and even in South America, when I was in Guatemala and Bolivia, they all say the same thing. The land knows you're there. The land speaks to us, and we must listen. And all of the principles of Indigenous knowledge come from this. Oscar taught us this. The principles of Indigenous leadership then must come from these same things. How they are worked out will be unique to each community and unique to each place. But the spirituality, what Vine Deloria has called the sacred geography, must become the central template for the conversations. And if Halidim, if the white people cannot understand us, we must continue to find ways to say it. That's the work of an Indigenous scholar. So my work, as my graduate students say, they have a term now that they use, they call it the marker flip. So it means that I take things that come from an Indigenous world and I flip them around and ask them back to the Halidim or the white world or the university. So a good example of this would be a Tahltan PhD grad recently, Judy Thompson, who studied her Tahltan language from Telegraph Creek. She had me, again, these poor unfortunate graduate students who make bad choices, but forgive them. She had me on her committee as the external examiner for her final examination for defense. And at that defense, she said, "My ancestors are speaking through me. My ancestors are speaking through me." So, marker flip. It goes like this. When my time for questions came, I said, Judy, I hear you say that your ancestors are speaking through you. That's a wonderful thing to say, and we indigenous people like to say that because we feel our ancestors being with us always. And so they are speaking through us. Now, Mr. Harper, Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Harper wants to run a pipeline, dangerous and unnecessary, through your people's territory. Could spill, could end up with tankers spilling out in the Hartley Bay for the Haisla people. First Nations people don't want it. They tell him so. But he wants to push it through anyway. Do you think, Judy, I said, do you think that Mr. Harper's ancestors are speaking through him? That makes people uncomfortable when you ask things like that. And again, I didn't get the lessons that my grandparents were trying to teach me about polite. I'm even polite when I'm critical, so I'm trying to be polite. I look around the room, I can see, oh, I blew it that time, I was not polite again. But Judy paused and she helped me. There was a long pause of silence as she thought about it and she looked up and she got a big grin on her face and she said, yes, I do think Mr. Harper's ancestors are speaking through him as well. She said, and it's called colonization. And it is still happening today. So how we speak to these things, we must bring our own challenges to ourselves, our own voices, our own knowledge in creative ways and send it back to the positions of power and authority that twist it and keep us in the state that we are. So our transformation requires bringing indigenous knowledge, as Ray and Oscar did, into an academy, into a university place, where we can validate it and make it ask questions of people like Mr. Harper about are his ancestors speaking through him, and is it possible that there's a different way to listen to those ancestors, all of our ancestors. This is the course of listening to history doing this. Well, my time is up, and I will just quote from a brief, as a conclusion, from a song that my friend Leanne Hinton, who Ray knows, Leanne is a linguist from the University of California at Berkeley, and one of those people, one of those few people, like Ray Barnhart, who is an anthropologist, that indigenous people love and have always loved. So, Leanne says, I know some people who live in the north. These are the Havasupai people that she worked with. They lived there since Columbus and many years before. They live in the wilderness where few men go. They say that in that country no man can be alone. For the land knows you're there. The land knows you're there. And the rocks and trees and rivers give you friendship and care. And when a man is old and his life is at an end, he takes a final journey to say farewell to the land. He tells it not to miss him. He tells it not to mourn, but to learn to live without him when he's dead and gone. For the land knows you're there. The land knows you're there, and the rocks and trees and rivers give you friendship and care. Thank you.
Right. I'm going to move into discussion mode here in a second. Grab a chair. My one job now is to really facilitate a discussion. I'm going to do that, attempt to do that with a couple of things. First thing I want to say is it makes me happy to see a real mixing of generations. It's good to see babies. I mean, it's an Alaska Native Studies conference, so that's just perfect. Because a long time ago, they would sit the children down and just let them hear these words. And if if you don't think that they can understand, then, you know, I think we all know they can understand. And the other thing I want to say is this time together is just so sacred. You know, the beauty of a conference like this is we can hear each other and say, yes, that's what we are doing as well, or that's what we're going to do, or that's what we've done, and we're going to help one another. So, you know, that's the whole spirit of this. So we've got time for discussion. The discussion is really, it's our panelists. You know, it's additional time. I know you felt pressed for time and feel bad. You know, but yeah, this is what we have. So we're just going to open up for discussion, and you guys are the ones who really want to answer the question.
I'd like to ask a question. Thank you. And thank you, to our panelists for your words. I wanted to ask you a question in particular because it caught my attention that you made reference to young people forgetting, and I thought I had to know, so I have to know. Is it that young people were forgetting, especially when those things are said about people who tend towards self-medication or towards suicide? It seems to me, what I have observed is that somebody forgot them, that time wasn't spent with them to teach, to share, to include, and that a lot of people who end up on that path are often people that, for whatever reasons, didn't get lifted up by anybody else, somehow became forgotten. And so I wonder, is it really intentional to say that those people forgot?
I'd like to also make space for Heather and Ray to have a chance to respond to this too, because this is for the entire circumpolar north. I bring this up not because it's just one story. I mean, out of this paper, there's lots of stories and lots of things that are happening, but I chose this to read to you, this section, because it is a primary, paramount concern across the circumpolar north. Suicide among our youth. Doesn't matter whether you're in Alaska, Nunavut, or Greenland, anywhere. The suicide rate in the north for our youth is higher. And it's a frightening specter that we deal with. I work with youth even now. I have worked with them. There are two kinds of things that I want to say. One is that, yes, some people neglected them. I do agree that happens. I have said, when I hear programs proposed for Aboriginal youth that do not include the healing of our Indigenous elders at the same time, I said, Aboriginal youth without an elder, a program for Native youth with no Native elders, that's the definition of a street gang. You got youth and no elders, that's a gang. That's why they get together and form gangs. There are no elders. Now, are the elders always capable to be responsible with the kids? Let's take the word apart. Response-able. Are they able to respond to the needs of the youth? And if they're not, let's not blame them. Now, at the same time, let us not let the youth off the hook completely. Yes, people have neglected you. Yes, you've had some hard times. But there is an individual level of personal responsibility and vision that we must encourage them to find, and that we must demand that they find for themselves. The elders that I worked with, who worked with youth with me, they didn't say, you can be all you can be. That's also in this paper. They said, your ancestors, your people, I knew your relations. They were good people. They're counting on you to turn the corner on this thing, to fight these demons, to fight this stuff. Now, the last part of it is I attended an Aboriginal youth gathering in Seattle, at Seattle University, not too long ago, where I heard, I sit and I listen to the youth. I don't talk. I never talk at these things unless someone asks me to say something, and then I make my comments very brief. But the youth are all talking. Half of them said, we have been to the smokehouse, to the longhouse. We have been trained in the languages. We have been trained in the spirit dancing. We have been trained in the ways of our ancestors, and we are learning from the elders on the res, in the rural life. We're learning the old ways, and it's healing us. The other half said, we never had elders. They weren't there for us. There was nobody. We were in the city. So we found hip-hop and rap and hip-hop helped us to heal and helped us to find that vision and that journey. Then the whole thing came to an end, and they said, Dr. Marker, would you make some brief comment? What do I say to the youth? I said, I know the elders from our longhouses. I know them personally, and I know their teachings. So when you describe your life with them, I understand exactly what that experience is. These other stories about rap and hip-hop, I don't know them. Tell me so that I can understand the values that are helping you. Tell me who are the elders of rap and hip-hop. Let them stand up and account for themselves. The elders of this thing that you're doing, that is the Aboriginal youth thing. Show me your elders, and I'll tell you who they are. So for me, there was a silence after that, by the way. For me, Aboriginal youth and elders go together. You cannot separate them. Thank you. Heather? Ray?
I'll do a flip marker. No. But I've made reference to working with folks, and Mike made reference to folks that I met on a year in sabbatical at the University of British Columbia while Oscar was there. And it's also where I met Mike. I had the opportunity to, coincidentally, things were really starting to develop there under the guidance of Verna Kirkness, who's the director of First Nation House of Learning. And I had, she invited me to join her in some of the courses she was teaching, and we ended up writing an article called 4 R's of First Nations Education, Higher Education. And what we argued was that for education to be complete and meaningful to First Nation students, Indigenous students, it needed to include respect, relevance, responsibility, and reciprocity. And I think all 4 of those are essential in reference to the question that you had. They're oftentimes the missing ingredient, regardless of which direction they're coming from. If you don't have all of those pieces on the part of the institution as well as on the part of the students, they're going to come up short. They're missing key ingredients. And another 5th R is relationships. The need for elders and youth to have opportunities to interact. So to me, it's not a either or dynamic. It's all these things have to be considered together.
We even came up with a 6th one, right? Joanne and I, because we were looking for the need to include spirituality and all this. So the 6th one is reverence.
I'll just briefly add to say that, in Canada, because so many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit families are recovering from intergenerational provide the support to the youth. And so we have to, I think the school system is also responsible to recognize that that's what's going on, and to do what it can, which is not everything it should, and not everything that a family can do by any means, but do what it can to bring culture, language, elders, and all that, respect and responsibility and relevance, and into the classroom, so that recognizing that not all kids are starting from the same place because some of their families are really struggling. So I think the collaboration there, everybody doing what they can to stay tuned.
My question is that it's a little bit, it's related, but a little bit at a different level. Because we've been talking about nurturing our youth, basically here. But what I have seen, I have been a faculty member, and I have Native American background of Seminole on my mom's side. And what I think that I see a need for is more of a nurturing of the faculty at the higher education level. And when you were saying respect, and the 4 R's or the 5 or the 6 R's, it seems like that would be something that would be so necessary for what I think for faculty to have their careers and their lives nurtured in higher education. And so we're talking about the youth, but that's not where it stops. Actually, it's all the way through. It's a systemic need all the way through.
Just wanted to make a comment. Thank you for your presentations, Gunkichish, and they're all just very wonderful, and I'm going to go away from this with a lot to think about. I just wanted to make a comment on the concept of walking in 2 worlds. That and there's a really good, I forget who the speaker was, but it's in the Sharing Our Pathways book. A sort of a really nice native critique of that idea, because it's one thing I think that gets embraced by non-natives, non-native institutions. They get really excited about that idea, walking in 2 worlds. Oh, you can do your indigenous thing, but you have to learn how to make a living, that sort of thing. I think totally traditional, just a few modifications, in an actual sod house or in a plant house would be okay. I think it's okay to acknowledge that would be fine. It was okay that our ancestors lived that way, and that even today that could happen if we chose to. So I don't think we should eliminate that possibility, and that could be a healthy thing. And then the other thing was, I think, also relating back to some of the pathological questions and questions about healing communities and things like suicide and abuse that's brought up. I think another thing that could help is that we don't just expect indigenous people to walk in 2 worlds, but everyone to walk. They have to walk in the indigenous world. Everyone. Because, you can make a living, right? You're going to have to make a job, but you also need to learn how to be a human being and live in the land.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that comment, and I think I also acknowledge that some people walk in more than 2 worlds, and that in different moments on the same day we're in different worlds, and we have shifting sense of identity and a sometimes fluid experience, and I also agree that non-Indigenous people should open themselves up to the possibility of living in a different way and learning in a different way. And one of the things that I'm proud of about the Inuit education system is that no matter what your heritage is, you are now expected to learn some Inuit, and you are expected to, eventually it will be fully bilingual, and no matter what your background is, that's what you learn, and culture as well. So I just want to echo what you said, and I will think about that more. And I think it's much more complex than just walking into worlds, so.
This is I agree with Heather that that's and definitely what you're saying for sure, that this whole walking into worlds thing. But I want to sort of add on to the first part of the comment that non-Indigenous or mainstream, let's just call them that, there's all kinds of words for these institutions of education, that essentially want Indigenous people to come and have your Indigenous thing here, but when you're in science or in our math class or, basic trigonometry, I don't see how being Indigenous is going to help you, that kind of thing. There's also a thing in our schools that's happening where we've got to assail it and take it apart and send it right back to them and tell them to quit it. This native learning styles thing, which goes with the walking into worlds. There's stereotypes about our kids, there's stereotypes about us, and about how we learn and who we are. And, Karen Swisher, years ago, wrote an article. I wish that our teacher ed students all over could continue to read this stuff. It was called The Learning Styles May Be Different, but the learning is just the same. So, yeah, the kids may come from different cultures, from different families, from different environments and backgrounds, but these stereotypes, Native kids are going to be this kind of learner and that kind of thing, that tends to perpetuate, I think, racism and exclusion in very subtle ways in these kinds of stereotypings about learning styles. I don't mind people having those conversations, but what happens is, in the hands of teachers in mainstream universities, they get used against it. It's just like the walking into worlds thing. Thank you.
Great points. We should always be conscious as we're talking decolonization of things that try to say it's one thing or the other, because it's a multiplicity of thought worlds, the Yupik thought world, the Tlingit thought world, the Inuit thought world. It's going to be of such a wide variety. And it's very easy for people to say, well, if you don't think like this, then you just think like something else. And that's just what it is. And so this is healthy, productive conversation. It's tough, small.
So I really appreciate the value of learning from the land, and the land being, first and foremost in education. And for me, a lot of this is about justice and fairness and responsibility and those kinds of things. Right now, we're in the middle we're at the end of a week of high-stakes testing in the schools, where kids are bombarded, my son included, coming home exhausted from taking tests all day long and not really learning anything about the land or people's connection to the land. And it is an extreme homogeny of neoliberal education across the globe. And it creates such a nihilism among youth that I really think that a lot of youth, Indigenous and not, feel powerless, nihilistic to some extent, and that there's this rampage of nihilism among youth and generations. And I wonder how we revitalize a generation of responsibility, a generation connected to the land that knows when you see all around them Pebble Mine and all of the things that go with the heartbreak of the land and feeling out of control and like it's out of their hands. And you see this a lot, in times when, people give up. And so what do we do to resist and become activists for a new generation of responsibility?
Big question. That's probably going to be our last question. Just give it a shot.
I'm not sure that I can suggest about how we all commonly become engaged in that, but one example in the new school system that we're using for an alternative to standardized testing is project-based learning, and so project-based assessments, and so there is a rubric, but also the student and the teacher develop their own criteria, and so even at a young age, you can design a project that the student is invested in, and that you can incorporate criteria such as relevance to my community, relevance to my family, and demonstrating responsibility in this project to the land or to the people who mean the most to me. And so, yeah, that's not going to accomplish, school by school comparisons or state by state comparisons. It's not going to do any of that stuff that lots of people want out of standardized testing. But it is encouraging authentic, authentic quotes, but production of or participation in production of knowledge that's relevant and that could, with the right leadership, could enact a responsibility to the community. So I think that starting that with young kids and then having a portfolio and showing their parents and their family what they did in school instead of coming home exhausted after a test, and then pulling that all the way through grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and graduating with, doing a presentation to their whole community on some project that they carried out for the benefit of the community is the direction that we're going. And I think it's very, very hopeful.
I just want to kind of send it to Ray in this way. I have all kinds of students, as you can imagine, who every term ask me that same exact question of graduate students. What can we do, right? And just like Heather, I get in this place, well, that's a very hard and very complicated question, and Heather's struggling with it, giving us some, parameters and that kind of thing. But I tend to say nowadays, okay, let me give you something to read. This is the answer for what we do. We need teachers who understand the importance of the land, the importance of the culture, to inspire the kids out of this cynicism and nihilism, just like you're talking about. Where do we get these teachers, Dr. M? Read this. It's called Education Indigenous to Place by Oscar Quigley and Ray Barnhart. And it's about taking teachers to a fish camp for just a week that turns their life around. And Ray and Oscar did it. And it's got a great amount of stuff in it that if you're not inspired after that, I can't help you. Ray?
I can't. There's problems with the test, but ongoing thing. But even more concerned, more deadly is the dehumanizing aspect of how they're used, the way they're administered, and what they're used for. It's a whole package that undermines the humanness of the students that we're working with. I certainly don't have an answer. You can read that article and be inspired, great, but there's no one solution for the problem. And it looks like it's going to take a while before we see the negative effects of the whole testing regime that's provided. But connecting to place, cultural immersion camps, things of that nature can do a lot to restore the damage, remove the damage that was done by the testing system. And we're doing 2 of them this summer, one up in Nome, one at Howard Woods Camp. Come and join us.
I want to thank my panelists. Real quick closing thoughts for my panelists. Please make sure you've got your forms, your photo release forms. And for those of you, just one quick thing is standardization is a big killing machine. It kills local knowledge. So thank you guys for your time.